The sound wasn't a crash so much as a decision. A low, deliberate crunch rolled across the cul-de-sac, slow enough that everyone had time to understand what was happening and still do nothing to stop it. Metal folded. Plastic snapped. The front corner of the Lamborghini dipped as if it had been punched in the ribs. Karen's SUV kept moving for another half-second, tire squealing, bumper grinding paint off the exotic like she was erasing a chalk line. Then she stopped, right in my driveway, like she owned the idea of property. For a beat, there was nothing but the ticking of cooling engines and the distant whine of a leaf blower 3 houses down. Someone's screen door clicked shut. Someone else inhaled sharply, the kind of gasp you hear in church when a baby drops a hymnal. Karen's driver door swung open. She stepped out with a phone already up, camera pointed not at the dent she'd made, but at my face, hunting for the reaction she could turn into a story. She wore a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes, and her eyes were busy, counting, recording, calculating who was watching and what angle would play best. "Well," she said loudly, for the benefit of every window, "this is what happens when people think rules don't apply to them." My front porch light made her lipstick look sharper than it should have. She had on a cardigan that screamed community meeting and shoes meant for speed walking away from consequences. Behind her, the Lamborghini sat stunned, the kind of stunned you expect from living things. I looked from the bent fender to her phone. "You backed into it." She swung the phone toward the damage like it was evidence against me. "It shouldn't be here. We have an emergency access policy." "In my driveway." She nodded as if I'd just admitted to a felony. Driveways still fall under community standards. Guest vehicles must be registered. That's in the bylaws. A curtain twitched across the street. The neighbor who never waved stared through a sliver of blinds like he was watching a wildlife documentary. Somebody's porch camera red light blinked. At least one person would have this in 4K, assuming Karen didn't accidentally have that footage disappear later. The front door behind me opened softly, footsteps on the tile. The visitor came out like he'd been waiting for a cue. He wasn't dressed like an influencer. No loud watch, no designer hoodie, no bright sneakers. Buttoned-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms. Clean haircut that said he sat under fluorescent lights for a living and had learned to look calm in rooms full of angry people. He stopped at the edge of the porch and took in the Lamborghini without a word. Karen pivoted, camera swinging to him, her voice rose a notch. "And here we are, the owner of the suspicious vehicle." He didn't correct her. He just stepped down the porch stairs slowly, hands visible, like he knew the kind of person who called anything she didn't like suspicious, also liked to claim she felt unsafe. He walked to the crumpled corner and crouched. He ran a finger along the scrape, then looked at the smear of Karen's paint on his car like it was a stain on a white shirt. No cursing, no shouting, just a small exhale through his nose. Karen hovered, filming. "You can't just park that here. This is a family community." He stood up. "I'm in a driveway." "You're in a community," she corrected, like she was teaching a child to speak. "And you're not registered. I've already reported this." To my left, the neighbor with the spotless lawn had stepped onto his porch with a beer he wasn't drinking. He watched Karen's performance the way men watch a bad quarterback. Interested, disappointed, but still invested because it was happening in his field. I said, "Karen, you just hit his car." Her smile tightened. I was attempting to leave the area safely. He approached me. The visitor's eyes flicked to her phone, then to me. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he'd seen this in different clothes 1,000 times. I took a breath and kept my voice flat. "He didn't approach you, you drove into his car." Karen lifted her chin. "I'm not going to argue with someone who's violating community rules." The visitor looked at her, then at the SUV. "Did you call the police?" Karen's eyes widened a fraction, then snapped back into that practiced smile. "We don't need police. We have an HOA. We handle our own issues." The way she said it made my stomach go cold, not because it sounded silly, because it sounded confident. "Okay," he said, soft. "Then we'll file a report and exchange information. What's your insurance? Her smile wavered, not because she didn't have insurance, but because she hadn't planned on paperwork that didn't go through her. I don't have to give you anything, she said. This is private property. It's your SUV, he replied, patient, and you hit my car. You shouldn't be here, she snapped, voice cracking through the polish. This neighborhood has standards. Something inside her wanted a fight, not a solution, a fight, a spectacle. She wanted him loud, she wanted him aggressive. She wanted him to give her the clip she could post with a caption like "Outsider threatens HOA volunteer." He didn't oblige, he walked back toward the porch. Calm, slow, measured, the kind of calm that makes unstable people feel exposed. Karen followed 2 steps, phone still up. I'm reporting you for harassment, she said, like a threat she'd used before. This is intimidation. I stepped down onto the walkway and moved between them. Karen, stop. She aimed the phone at me now. Oh, so now you're blocking an HOA officer? Great, that's on camera. I looked straight at her lens. He's not threatening you. She smiled wider, eyes flat. You don't get to decide how I feel. A dry laugh almost escaped me, but it died halfway. It wasn't funny, not really. It was just familiar. The kind of line people used when they needed to turn a normal situation into leverage. The visitor's voice stayed even. I'm leaving your camera alone. I'm asking for insurance information. Karen jutted her chin toward the Lamborghini. That car is a violation. You're lucky I didn't have it towed. It's in my driveway, I said again. Karen's gaze flicked past me to the people watching. She raised her voice on purpose. This is why we have rules, so we don't become one of those neighborhoods. One of those neighborhoods. The phrase landed like a dog whistle. A few faces in windows moved, some looked away. The air changed. Karen could smell that shift, and she fed on it. I said quietly, Karen, he's the district attorney. The words weren't dramatic, they weren't even angry, they were a fact, dropped like a paperweight. Her face froze mid-expression. The smile didn't fall all at once, it cracked like ice under a boot. Her eyes flicked to his face, then to my face, searching for the joke she could call out. She didn't find it. The visitor didn't confirm, he didn't deny. He just watched her, waiting to see which version of herself she would become now that the script had changed. In the silence, somebody's car alarm chirped 2 houses away, a tiny sound that felt like laughter. Karen's phone dipped a half-inch. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. She tried to reboot her smile, but now it looked like a mask that didn't fit. Well, she said, too brightly, then he should know better. The visitor nodded once, as if acknowledging a point in a debate he was about to win. I do know better, he said. That's why I'm going to ask one more time for your insurance information. Karen's nostrils flared. Her eyes cut to the neighbor with the beer, then to another porch where an older man had stepped out, posture straight, arms crossed, face unreadable. Karen's authority depended on being watched and believed. The minute people started watching and doubting, she had a problem. I don't have to do anything, she said, voice lower now. This is HOA business. The visitor's tone didn't change. You damaged property, that's not an HOA matter. Karen lifted her phone again like a shield. I'm calling the board. She turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV. She didn't inspect the damage she'd caused. She didn't look at the Lamborghini like a normal person would look at a mistake. She moved like she'd completed a task. She climbed into her driver's seat, slammed the door, and sat there with her hands on the wheel, phone at her ear. The SUV idled, exhaust puffing in small, steady breaths. From where I stood, I could see her jaw moving as she spoke. Fast, urgent, not apologetic. My own phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The HOA app notification lit the screen like a slap. Compliance alert, unregistered vehicle observed, security review pending. Below it, another notification popped up from the neighborhood group chat. A new video post, Karen's name at the top, a thumbnail of my driveway. Framed to show the Lamborghini, her SUV, and me standing in front of her phone like I was blocking something. I clicked before I could stop myself. The video started after the impact, of course. It began with Karen's voice saying loudly, "This is what happens when people think rules don't apply to them." No crunch, no bumper, no moment of her SUV moving into the Lamborghini, just the aftermath and her narrative. My stomach tightened, not because of the dent. A dent could be fixed. What she was doing to the story, to the neighborhood's perception, to the paper trail, that was harder to repair. The visitor stepped closer, voice low so the porch cameras wouldn't catch it. "Your doorbell camera," he said. "Did it record?" I looked back at the little black lens beside my door. The tiny status light was off. "It should," I said. He nodded once, like he'd expected that answer and already suspected the problem. "Let's check." We went inside. The house felt suddenly too quiet, like the air had been sucked out through a vent. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. The timeline loaded in chunks, then showed a gap. A clean gap, like someone had taken scissors to time. My throat went dry. "That's impossible," I whispered. The visitor stared at the missing minutes, then at me. "Nothing's impossible," he said, "not when someone thinks they own the rules." Outside, Karen's SUV rolled out of my driveway smoothly, like she hadn't just committed a crime in front of half the street. As she passed the neighbor with the beer, she slowed, rolled down her window, and said something I couldn't hear. The neighbor didn't smile, he didn't wave, he just watched her go, eyes narrowed. My phone buzzed again. Another HOA notification. Emergency board review scheduled. Attendance required. The visitor looked at the screen, then at me, and for the first time his calm had an edge to it. Not anger, focus. "They just escalated," he said. I stared at the blank spot in my doorbell footage, the place where reality had been cut out and replaced with nothing. "No," I said, "they planned it." The next morning, the Lamborghini looked worse in daylight. At night the damage had been dramatic, almost cinematic. In the sun, it was just ugly. The scrape along the front quarter panel had chewed through paint down to raw metal, and the headlight housing sat slightly crooked, like a black eye that didn't want to open all the way. A thin curl of plastic hung from the bumper, swaying in the breeze like a loose tooth. Karen's SUV was gone. Of course it was. People like her never left their mess behind. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while the coffee brewed. Another HOA notification. The app had the same tone as a debt collector pretending to be polite. Compliance update, incident report filed, community safety review in progress. I opened it. The message was written in that smooth, corporate voice that makes you feel like you're arguing with a wall. Due to recent suspicious activity and unverified visitor presence, the association is initiating an immediate review of resident compliance and guest access procedures. Suspicious activity, unverified visitor, like my driveway had become a border checkpoint overnight. The visitor, who had introduced himself the night before with a handshake and a calm smile, sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. He hadn't slept much. He didn't look tired, though. He looked sharpened, like the lack of sleep had sanded off whatever patience he normally carried around for people who played games. He read the message, then slid the phone back to me without comment. The coffee machine clicked. I poured 2 mugs. My hand shook slightly, and I hated that it did. Not because I was afraid of Karen, because I was afraid of how quickly she'd turned a dented car into a neighborhood crisis. Dry humor tried to bubble up in my head, something about Homeland Security now operating out of the HOA clubhouse, but it didn't land. The air in my kitchen felt heavy, like a storm was waiting outside. A knock came at the door. Not a neighbor knock, not a friendly tap, 3 firm hits that said official business. I opened it to find an envelope taped to my doorframe with clear packing tape, the kind that leaves residue like a scar. The HOA logo sat at the top, bold and smug. Under it, in capital letters, Notice of Violation. I peeled it off slowly, The paper was thick, expensive. Someone had paid money to make harassment look professional. Inside were 3 pages. Violation 1. Unregistered guest vehicle present on premises. Fine $250. Deadline 72 hours. Violation 2. Disruption of community peace and order. Fine $150. Deadline 72 hours. Violation 3. Failure to cooperate with HOA safety protocols. Fine $300. Deadline 72 hours. Total $700. At the bottom, a cheerful reminder. Failure to remit payment may result in further enforcement action, including towing, lien filing, and legal remedies. I stared at it long enough for my eyes to blur. The visitor leaned over my shoulder and read it once. "They're building a timeline," he said quietly. "What timeline?" "A pressure timeline," he said. "Short deadlines, stacked charges. It's designed to make you panic and pay." I swallowed. Paying doesn't even make sense. They're the ones who smashed the car. He nodded. "It's not about sense." I looked back at the envelope. The wording was too clean, too careful. Karen wasn't smart enough to write like that. Karen could shout and film and threaten, but this was a machine speaking through her. My phone buzzed again. Another notification, this time from the neighborhood group chat. Karen had posted a new message. "Residents, please be advised, we had a serious safety incident last night involving an unknown visitor vehicle. HOA responded swiftly to protect our families. Please remain vigilant and report suspicious activity. Thank you for your cooperation." Attached was another video, edited tighter. No mention of the Lamborghini being hit, no mention of her SUV, just her face, worried and righteous, standing in my driveway like she'd found a bomb. The comments were already piling up. "Thank you for keeping us safe. HOA needs to be stricter. Why are outsiders coming in here? Call the police next time. Tow it." I scrolled until I saw one comment that made my jaw clench. "Is that the guy who was yelling at Karen? He looked aggressive." Aggressive, that was the word people used when they didn't know what else to call someone they didn't like. Karen had given them a script, and they were reading it. The visitor didn't react. He just watched me scroll, then reached across the table and flipped my phone face down like he was closing a coffin. "Don't argue in there," he said. I wasn't going to. He raised an eyebrow, and for the first time I saw a flicker of humor in him. Dry, tired, but real. Good, because it's a trap. You give them a quote, they turn it into a confession. Another knock came, this one lighter, a neighbor knock. When I opened the door, Mrs. Harlan stood on my porch with a casserole dish like she was responding to a death in the family. She was in her 60s, hair set perfectly, eyes soft but alert. "I heard there was an incident," she said carefully, like she didn't want the word Karen to summon a demon. I stepped aside and let her see the Lamborghini. She made a small sound in her throat, half sympathy, half fascination. "Oh my," she said, that's quite a car." "It was," I said. She handed me the dish. "I made lasagna, in case you're busy." Her eyes flicked toward the street, toward the direction Karen lived, then back to me. "Be careful," she whispered. Before I could ask what she meant, she gave a tight smile and walked away like she'd said too much. The visitor watched her go through the window. "That was a warning," he said. "I know." The day didn't calm down, it accelerated. At 10, I got an email from the HOA board. Subject, Community Safety Incident Update. It opened with concern, then slid into accusation with the grace of a knife. Due to recent events involving a non-resident individual and a high-profile vehicle, the board is initiating immediate guest access enforcement to protect community standards. The association reserves the right to tow unauthorized vehicles and restrict guest access. High-profile vehicle, like the Lamborghini, was a celebrity causing trouble at a restaurant. Then came the line that made my skin crawl. Residents are reminded that failure to comply may result in legal action. Legal action from an HOA against me for letting someone park in my driveway. I looked at the visitor. "They're threatening me with legal action," I said, voice flat. He nodded slowly. "They want to scare you into signing something." "Signing what?" He tapped the violation notice with his finger. "A waiver, a settlement, a confession. Anything that makes you look like the problem." As if summoned by the word settlement, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, "Hello." A man's voice, calm and businesslike. "Is this the homeowner at 114 Ridgecrest?" "Yes." "This is Coastal Tow and Recovery. We have an authorization on file to remove an unauthorized vehicle from your property tonight." My stomach dropped. "What authorization?" "HOA board authorization," he said, like that explained everything. "The vehicle is in my driveway," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't tow it." He paused just long enough to sound reasonable. "Sir, I'm not here to argue, I'm here to do my job." "What's your name?" the visitor asked suddenly, leaning close. I put the phone on speaker. "My guest is asking for your name." Another pause. "Who is your guest?" The visitor's eyes met mine. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't play titles, not yet." I said, "He's a friend." The tow operator cleared his throat. "My name is Vince. Look, if you want to dispute it, you need to call the HOA." "You have my number," the visitor said into the speaker, voice calm and even. "Text me the authorization order and the tow request paperwork. I'll review it." Vince hesitated. "Who are you?" "Someone who reads," the visitor replied. It was such a simple line, delivered so flat, that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the first time that morning something didn't feel like it was crushing my ribs. Vince hung up without agreeing to anything. I stared at the phone. "He's going to tow it anyway." "Maybe," the visitor said, "or maybe he's going to realize the paperwork doesn't exist." "Then why call?" The visitor leaned back in his chair. "Because intimidation works even when it's fake. People comply before they verify." I looked at the Lamborghini through the window, sitting low and quiet like a predator sleeping. "What do we do?" "We document," he said. "Everything, every email, every fine, every call, every threat." He stood and walked to the counter where my mail sat in a neat stack. He flipped through it, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. He lifted an envelope. "My bank." "Open." My heart thumped. I didn't open that. He turned it over. The seal had been sliced clean, not torn. Someone had used something sharp. "Careful." He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Someone went through your mailbox last night." A cold line ran up my spine. The dent in the Lamborghini suddenly felt small, like a distraction, like the first punch in a fight where the real goal wasn't bruises. The visitor set the envelope down gently, as if touching it too hard might erase fingerprints. I forced myself to breathe. "Karen did this." He shook his head. "Karen doesn't do quiet." "So who does?" He finally looked at me, and there was no humor now, just certainty. "Someone above her," he said. "Someone who knows how to hurt you without raising their voice." Another notification buzzed. This time it wasn't the HOA app, it was my email. A message from the HOA, marked urgent. "Emergency compliance hearing scheduled. Attendance required. Date tomorrow. Time 6:00 p.m. Location, Community Clubhouse." I stared at the screen. "Tomorrow," I said, voice hollow. The visitor leaned over and read it. His jaw tightened, just slightly, the first real crack in his calm. "They're moving fast," he said. "Why?" He looked at the Lamborghini again, then back at the open bank envelope, then at the violation notice taped to my door like a target. "Because they think you'll fold," he said. And because whatever they're doing, they don't want me here long enough to see it. I swallowed hard. So what now? The visitor picked up his pen and wrote something on the legal pad. One line, then he slid it toward me. It was a name. Not Karen's. Not Vince's. The HOA president. Under it, he wrote 2 more words. Start there. Outside, down the street, a car rolled slowly past my house, too slow. The driver didn't look at the road. He looked at my porch, at my driveway, at the Lamborghini. Then he kept going, disappearing around the bend like a warning that had wheels. I stood in my kitchen holding an open bank envelope, an HOA fine, and a casserole dish I hadn't asked for, realizing my quiet little home had just been turned into a battlefield. And the worst part wasn't the dented car. It was the speed. How quickly a neighborhood could decide you were the problem, as long as someone like Karen gave them permission. By sundown, the Lamborghini wasn't a car anymore. It was bait. The kind of bait you could see from half a block away, sitting low in my driveway with its bruised front corner and that ridiculous shine that still made it look expensive even when it was hurt. The streetlights came on one by one, washing the cul-de-sac in pale amber. Curtains shifted. Porch lights flicked. Somewhere, a garage door opened and closed like someone wanted to pretend they were busy doing normal life. Inside, the house felt like it was holding its breath. The visitor stood at my kitchen window, phone in hand, watching the street the way a man watches a courtroom when he knows the jury is already leaning the wrong way. He hadn't told me to move the car. He hadn't told me to hide. He said one thing instead. Let them try. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It made me feel like I was about to witness something ugly and I was going to have to live here afterward. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Tow scheduled, unauthorized vehicle removal tonight, last chance to comply. No name, no company, no details, just the kind of message you send when you want someone to feel watched. I showed it to the visitor. He read it, then looked up at me. That's not how legitimate businesses talk, he said. So it's fake. Or it's real and sloppy, he replied. Either way, it's useful. Useful how? He set his phone down on the counter and picked up his jacket. Because it tells us they're acting, now we can see who shows up. Dry humor flashed in my mind, something about hosting a midnight HOA field trip, but my stomach was too tight to laugh. We waited. The neighborhood went quiet in that way it only does when people are listening. No dogs barking, no music. Even the crickets sounded like they were keeping it down out of respect for the tension. At 10:03, headlights rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. A tow truck. Not the big city kind with bright branding and cheerful phone numbers. This one was a dull white with a logo that looked like it had been slapped on with a stencil. The driver didn't come in fast, like he had a job to do. He came in slow, like he was entering a room where someone might shoot him. He stopped at the curb, engine idling. Then he just sat there. I watched from the window, my hands clenched at my sides. Why isn't he getting out? The visitor didn't answer right away. He was watching the same thing, eyes steady. He's waiting for someone, he said finally. A minute later, another vehicle entered the cul-de-sac. Black SUV, no headlights at first, then they flicked on at the last second. It rolled past my house, slow enough I could see the driver's silhouette. The SUV didn't park. It looped the circle and stopped behind the tow truck, blocking it in like a handler keeping a dog on a leash. Then a third vehicle arrived. Karen's SUV. Of course. She pulled in like she was late to her own show, parked half on the curb, and stepped out with her phone already raised. She wore a reflective safety vest, bright neon yellow, the kind construction workers wear when they don't want to be hit by idiots. On her, it looked like a costume. She walked toward my driveway with the confidence of someone who'd already written the ending. I opened the front door before she could knock, stepping out onto the porch. The visitor followed a pace behind me, calm and quiet. Karen's smile was immediate and sharp. "Good evening," she called, loud enough for every neighbor's camera to catch. "We are here to resolve the situation." "You're here to tow a car off my property," I said. She lifted her clipboard like it was a badge. "Unauthorized vehicle, unregistered guest, safety risk. The board has authorized removal." The tow driver finally got out, heavy boots on pavement, hands in his pockets like he didn't want to touch anything. He glanced at the Lamborghini, then at Karen, then at me. The visitor stepped forward slightly. "Can I see the tow authorization paperwork?" Karen's smile twitched. "We don't have to show you anything. HOA policy." "Show me the paperwork," he repeated, voice mild. Karen laughed, fake and bright. "Oh, you people always want paperwork, that's cute." The tow driver cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need something, at least a work order." Karen shot him a look that could have cracked glass. "It's authorized." She snapped. The tow driver's shoulders lifted in a helpless shrug. He looked at me, then away, like he didn't want to be the villain, but he didn't want to lose a job either. The black SUV's driver door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad, wearing a dark polo with a small badge-shaped logo over the chest that said Community Security, the kind of branding designed to look official enough to scare people who didn't know better. He walked up slowly, hands relaxed, posture easy, but his eyes weren't easy. His eyes were cold and trained, scanning the porch, the driveway, the street, the windows. He looked like someone who'd been paid to intimidate people for years and had gotten good at it. Karen brightened when she saw him. "Oh good, you're here," she said, like she'd called the adult in the room. The man gave her a small nod, then turned his attention to us. "Evening," he said. His voice was calm, low, almost friendly. "I'm Carter, HOA security contractor." The visitor's gaze stayed on him. "Security contractor," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. Carter smiled faintly. "We got a call about a compliance issue, unauthorized vehicle, potential disturbance." "There's no disturbance," I said. Carter's eyes shifted to me briefly, then back to the visitor. "That depends," he said. "Sometimes the disturbance is the refusal to comply." Karen chimed in immediately, phone held up like a weapon. "Exactly, we've been patient, but we have rules. We can't just let people bring in whatever they want." She flicked her eyes toward the Lamborghini like it was contraband. The visitor's voice stayed calm. "You're towing a vehicle from private property without a signed work order or a police request." Carter's smile didn't move. "HOA has authority." The visitor tilted his head. "Over my driveway." Carter's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Over the community." That phrase again, like the neighborhood was a kingdom and the HOA was the crown. I heard a faint click from across the street, someone's door opening quietly. The neighbor with the beer had returned, this time with a different expression, not curiosity, concern. Karen took a step closer, still filming. "We're not doing this all night, tow it." The tow driver hesitated, looking between Carter and the visitor like a man trapped between a paycheck and a lawsuit. The visitor spoke softly, but his words landed hard. "If you hook that car, you're committing theft." The tow driver's face tightened. "I'm not trying to steal anything, sir. I'm just doing your job," the visitor finished. "I understand. That's why I'm asking you for the paperwork." Karen snapped, "Just do it." Carter raised one hand slightly, not at Karen, but at the tow driver. "A quiet signal, a leash tug. Hook it," he said. The tow driver moved, slow and reluctant, walking toward the Lamborghini's rear. The visitor stepped forward, and for the first time his calm sharpened into something that made the hair on my arms lift. "Stop," he said. The tow driver froze mid-step. Carter's eyes hardened. "Sir," he said, voice still polite, "you don't want to interfere with authorized enforcement." The visitor looked him straight in the face. "You don't want to keep pretending this is enforcement." Karen's smile flickered, and she leaned toward Carter like she needed his confidence to stay upright. "He's harassing us," she said loudly. "He's trying to intimidate me." The visitor didn't even glance at her. He kept his focus on Carter, like Karen was noise and Carter was the signal. "What's your full name?" the visitor asked. Carter's smile returned thin. "Why?" "So I can spell it correctly," the visitor said. A beat of silence. It was such a small line, delivered so evenly, but it hit Carter like a slap. His posture shifted, not much, just enough to show he'd heard the threat underneath the politeness. Karen didn't understand. She barreled forward anyway, phone up, voice rising. "This is ridiculous. You can't just park a sports car here and expect us to roll out a red carpet. This isn't Beverly Hills. This is a family neighborhood." The visitor finally looked at her, and his expression was almost sympathetic, like she was a dog barking at a train. Then he looked back at Carter. "You're not a police officer," he said. Carter's jaw tightened. "No. You don't have police authority," the visitor continued. "No. You're acting under HOA direction." "Yes. And you're directing a tow without proper documentation." Carter's eyes flicked toward Karen, then back. "We have authorization." "From who?" the visitor asked. Karen jumped in too fast. "From the board." The visitor's voice stayed quiet. "Which board member signed it?" Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "We don't have to." "Which board member?" he repeated. The tow driver shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his truck like he wanted to disappear into it. Carter stepped closer, invading space the way men do when they want you to feel smaller. "Sir," he said low, "you're escalating a situation that doesn't need to be escalated." The visitor didn't step back. He didn't raise his voice. He simply met Carter's eyes. "You're already escalated," he said. "You came here at night with a tow truck and a fake vest." Karen's face went red. "Fake vest?" she shrieked. "How dare you?" Carter lifted a hand again, a calming gesture, but it wasn't calming. It was control. "Ma'am, let me handle it." Karen snapped her mouth shut like she'd been trained. That's when I understood. Karen wasn't the top of this food chain. She was the loud part, the messy part, the part that drew attention while someone else did the real work. Carter turned to me, voice smooth. "Homeowner," he said, like my name wasn't worth using. "We can do this easy or we can do it hard. Easy is you cooperate. Hard is we keep coming back until you do." My stomach turned. It wasn't a threat you could call the police about easily. It was vague enough to deny later, but the meaning was clear. The visitor's voice stayed calm. "That's intimidation." Carter smiled faintly. "No," he said, "that's reality." Across the street, the older vet neighbor stepped off his porch and walked closer, stopping at the edge of his lawn. He didn't speak. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching, a witness with a spine. Karen's phone wavered slightly. She didn't like witnesses who didn't clap. The visitor turned his head slightly toward the tow driver. "What's your name again?" The tow driver swallowed. "Vince." The visitor nodded. "Vince, I'm asking you one more time, do you have a signed work order?" Vince looked at Karen, then Carter, then the ground. "No, sir." Karen exploded. "You don't need it." Carter's eyes flashed at Vince. "You're fine, hook it." Vince didn't move. The visitor's voice dropped even lower. "Vince, if you touch that car without paperwork, you're the one whose name ends up on the report." That did it. Vince stepped back, hands raised slightly. "I'm not touching it," he muttered. "Not without paperwork." Karen's face twisted. "Unbelievable." Carter's calm cracked just a hair. "Get back in your truck," he told Vince, voice sharp. Vince didn't argue. He walked away fast, like he'd just escaped something. Carter turned back to us, eyes colder now. "You just made this complicated," he said. The visitor nodded once. "Good." Karen's phone was still recording, but her hand shook. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. The visitor's expression didn't change. Probably, he said, but not the way you think. Carter leaned in slightly, voice low enough that Karen's camera wouldn't catch it clearly. You don't belong here, he said to the visitor. You're not part of this community. The visitor smiled faintly, the first real smile I'd seen from him. It wasn't warm, it was surgical. I'm visiting, he said, and you're making memories. Carter stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back. He gave Karen a look that wasn't comfort, it was command. Leave, he said. Karen's mouth opened, ready to protest, but she caught herself. She lowered her phone and walked back to her SUV like a soldier retreating on orders, still angry but suddenly obedient. Carter lingered a second longer, eyes on me. This isn't over, he said. Then he turned and walked back to the black SUV. He got in, closed the door, and the vehicle rolled away without urgency, like it had all the time in the world. The tow truck followed, headlights sweeping across my house one last time like a searchlight. When the cul-de-sac finally went quiet again, I realized my hands were trembling. The visitor exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. They wanted you scared, he said. I am scared, I admitted. He nodded. Good, that means you're paying attention. We went inside, and I locked the door, twice. In the kitchen. The visitor pulled out his phone and typed something, then held it up to me. A note, simple and brutal. Tow attempt, no paperwork, security contractor present, threats made, witness across street. Then he looked at me. Your mailbox, he said, check it. I frowned. Why? Because intimidation always comes with information theft, he replied. They want to know what you're planning before you do. I grabbed my keys and stepped back outside, porch light casting a small circle of safety that felt thinner than paper. The mailbox sat at the curb, innocent and ordinary. I opened it. Empty. Not even junk mail. Just the smell of cold metal and the faint scrape marks near the lock, like someone had pried it open carefully and put it back like nothing happened. I stood there staring into the hollow space where my life was supposed to arrive in envelopes. Behind me, the visitor's voice carried softly from the porch. They're not just enforcing, he said. I turned, heart pounding. They're hunting, he finished. By the time the sun came up, the neighborhood had already decided what I was. Not guilty or innocent, not right or wrong, just inconvenient. The kind of resident who attracts trouble, who makes the HOA work harder, who brings outsiders into a place that prided itself on being closed, quiet, and controlled. The kind of person people stopped waving at because waving felt like taking sides. I stood at my kitchen sink, staring out at the street while the coffee cooled untouched. A jogger passed my house and slowed, just enough to glance at the Lamborghini. His eyes lingered on the dent like it was proof of something. He sped up again without looking back. My phone buzzed with an email alert. From City of Brookhaven Code Enforcement. Subject, inspection notice. I opened it, expecting spam. It was. A complaint had been filed regarding unpermitted exterior modifications on my property. The city inspector would arrive between 10 a.m. and noon. Failure to comply could result in fines. I reread it twice, waiting for the punchline. I hadn't modified anything. My house looked like every other house on the block. Beige siding, small porch, tidy yard, HOA approved everything. The only thing unusual about my property was the fact that a Lamborghini had been assaulted in it. The visitor stepped into the kitchen, already dressed, already focused. He didn't ask if I'd slept. He didn't need to. My face would have told him. New move, I said, holding up the phone. He read the email and nodded once. They're stacking pressure, he said. It's the city, I replied. That's not HOA. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. HOA doesn't need to be the city, he said. They just need to know how to push the right buttons. I hated how calm he was, not because it was wrong, because it made it feel like he'd seen this play out before and the ending wasn't pretty. At 9:42, my insurance agent called. Her voice was too bright, too careful. "Hi, I'm just following up on an inquiry we received regarding your property." My stomach dropped. "What inquiry?" "Someone contacted us about possible hazardous conditions," she said, like she was reading off a script. "Something about unpermitted construction, potential liability concerns. We just need to confirm there are no safety issues." I stared at the wall, feeling the air thin around me. "Who contacted you?" "I can't disclose that," she said. Of course she couldn't. The visitor held up a hand, and I put the phone on speaker. He spoke politely. "Ma'am, this is a harassment pattern. Please document the inquiry, including the time and any notes about what was alleged." There was a pause on the line. My agent's tone shifted, less cheerful now, more cautious. "I can note that," she said, "but we do have to follow up." "We will cooperate," he replied. "Thank you." When I ended the call, my hands were cold. "They're trying to mess with my insurance," I said. "They're trying to mess with your life," the visitor corrected. The doorbell rang at 10:11. Not a knock, a firm press that held too long, like someone wanted the chime to sound like an alarm. I opened the door and found a man in a city-issued windbreaker holding a clipboard. He looked tired in the way city employees look tired, like they'd been yelled at by strangers for years and had learned to keep their emotions behind their teeth. "Morning," he said. "Code enforcement. I'm here about a complaint." I stepped aside and let him see the front of the house. "What complaint?" I asked. He glanced down at his paperwork. "Unpermitted exterior modifications, unsafe fence structure, possible encroachment." "My fence has been here since I bought the place," I said. He shrugged slightly, not rude, just resigned. "I don't decide what gets called in," he said. "I just check it." The visitor appeared behind me, calm and quiet. The inspector looked at him briefly, then back to his clipboard. "I'm going to walk the perimeter," the inspector said. "Go ahead," I replied. We followed him around the side yard. He checked the fence posts, tapped them lightly, measured a distance, took a photo of the gate latch. The fence didn't wobble, it didn't lean, it didn't threaten anyone's safety. It was the kind of fence you stop noticing after a week of living there. The inspector moved to the back patio, squinted at my small storage shed, and frowned. "What's that?" he asked. "A shed," I said. "It was here when I moved in." He flipped a page. "Complaint says it was installed recently." It was. He stared at it another moment, then wrote something down. "I'm not seeing anything obvious," he said, voice neutral. Relief loosened my chest slightly. Then he added, "But I'll need to check permits on file." My relief died. He wasn't threatening me, he was doing his job, but the effect was the same. I was now on the city's radar, and once you're on the radar, you don't just vanish because you're innocent. When he left, he gave me a look that almost counted as sympathy. "You might want to talk to your HOA," he said. I watched him walk down the driveway, and the visitor spoke quietly behind me. "That was meant to drain you," he said. "Time, stress, paperwork." "It's working," I admitted. The neighborhood group chat buzzed again. A new post from Karen. Reminder, guest access policy enforcement continues. Please report unregistered vehicles. We are also cooperating with city officials regarding potential safety concerns. She said it like she was helping. The comments were worse now. "Good, get those violations handled." "I saw a city guy there, about time." "This is why we pay HOA fees." "Maybe he should move if he doesn't like the rules." "Maybe he should move." That line was the one that hit hardest, because it wasn't just Karen anymore, it was the neighborhood. Karen had turned the block into a jury, and the jury was starting to enjoy the show. The visitor took my phone gently and set it down. "Stop reading that," he said. "I need to know what they're saying." "You need to know what they're doing," he corrected. He walked to the kitchen table, spread out the HOA notices, the violation fines, the code enforcement email, and the tow threat text like he was laying out evidence for a case. "This is a pattern," he said, "not random, not petty, organized." I stared at the pile of paper and screens. "Organized by who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. A knock came again, this time from my back gate. I froze. The visitor's eyes lifted sharply. He gestured for me to stay inside. He moved toward the back door without rushing, like a man who refused to let fear make him sloppy. Through the glass, I saw someone standing at the gate, a man in a polo shirt with a tool belt, a contractor, or someone pretending to be one. He held up a business card toward the camera like it was an ID badge. The visitor opened the door but didn't step out. "Can I help you?" The man smiled too quickly. "Fence inspection," he said. "Got a report about instability." "From who?" the visitor asked. The man's smile faltered. "HOA," he said. The visitor's voice stayed calm. "No," he said, "you don't inspect fences on private property without permission. Leave." The contractor's face tightened. "I'm just doing my job." "That seems popular today," the visitor replied. The contractor lingered a second too long, eyes scanning the yard like he was looking for something else. Then he turned and left. When the gate clicked shut, my heart finally released a breath. I stepped closer. "That wasn't the city," I said. "No," the visitor agreed. "That was them." At noon, the older vet neighbor approached my porch. He didn't carry a casserole dish. He carried himself like he'd survived things. Gray hair, stiff shoulders, eyes that missed nothing. He stood at the bottom step, not crossing onto my porch like he respected boundaries. "You got a minute?" he asked. I nodded. He looked past me toward the driveway. "That car," he said, "it's not why they're doing this." "I know," I replied. He nodded slowly, like he was pleased I wasn't stupid. "They did it to the Wagners 2 years ago," he said. "Fines, inspections, towing threats. They sold in 6 weeks, packed up like they were fleeing a wildfire." My stomach tightened. "Why?" The neighbor's jaw flexed. "They said it was about noise," he said. "Then it was trash cans, then it was a fence, then it was nuisance behavior, same playbook." I glanced at the visitor. He was listening silently, face unreadable. The neighbor continued, voice low. "Then the Ruiz family, same thing, sold fast, took a loss, moved out." My throat went dry. "Who bought their house?" The neighbor's eyes narrowed. "Same LLC," he said. "Different name on the deed, but same money behind it." The visitor's gaze sharpened. "Do you know the name of the LLC?" he asked. The neighbor hesitated, then nodded. "I wrote it down," he said. "Didn't know why at the time, just felt off." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. He handed it to the visitor. The visitor opened it and read. His face didn't change, but something in his posture did, like he just found the first real thread in a sweater. "Thank you," he said. The neighbor looked at me. "They want you gone," he said plainly. "Not because of a car, because you won't play along." I swallowed hard. Play along with what? The neighbor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Control," he said. "Money, whatever it is, it's bigger than Karen." He turned slightly, scanning the street. "And don't think Karen's the boss. Karen's the loudspeaker. The boss is the one who stays clean." Then he walked away, leaving my porch like a man who'd done his duty and didn't want applause. Inside, the visitor studied the scrap of paper again. He typed something into his phone, then looked up at me. "They're not just enforcing rules," he said. I felt my pulse in my throat. "They're forcing sales," I said. He nodded once. "They're harvesting properties," he replied. The word harvesting made my skin crawl. It made the neighborhood sound like a field and the residents sound like crops. My phone buzzed again. A new email. From the HOA board. Subject, hearing packet attached. I opened it and scrolled. pages of accusations, resident hostility, failure to comply, threatening behavior toward HOA representative, potential safety risk. It read like a criminal case written by someone who'd never met a criminal. At the bottom was a new document, Nuisance Property Designation Proposal. My vision tunneled. They're trying to label my house a nuisance, I whispered. The visitor leaned in, eyes scanning the text fast. That's the lever, he said. Once they have that, they can crush you financially. I scrolled again and noticed something strange. The packet was incomplete. Page numbers skipped, exhibits referenced that weren't attached, a photo labeled resident confrontation that wasn't there. They forgot pages, I said. The visitor shook his head slowly. They didn't forget, he said. He pointed to the missing exhibits. They're going to bring those tomorrow, he said. In person, with a crowd, with drama, they want you blindsided. I stared at the screen, the accusations, the missing pieces, the trap being built like a stage. My doorbell camera suddenly chimed. Motion detected. I looked at the live feed. A hand slid something under my front door. A white envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in thick black marker like it had been carved. The visitor moved fast, opening the door, picking up the envelope carefully by the edges. He brought it inside and set it on the table like it was contaminated. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Drop the claim, or you'll regret it. No signature, no logo, no attempt to look official. Just the truth, finally said out loud. I stared at it until the words stopped looking like letters and started looking like a threat you could feel in your bones. The visitor's voice was calm but colder now. Now it's criminal, he said. I swallowed hard. It already was. He nodded once. Yes, he said, but now they admitted it. Outside, the neighborhood sat quiet and neat and manicured, pretending it wasn't built on fear. And inside my kitchen, surrounded by fines and inspections and threats, I realized something worse than Karen's smug smile. Karen wasn't the danger. Karen was the distraction. The hearing notice sat on my kitchen table like a summons from a different century. Cream-colored paper, thick stock, the HOA logo stamped at the top like a seal of authority. It wasn't mailed. It was hand-delivered, which meant someone wanted the intimidation to arrive with footsteps. Emergency compliance hearing. Attendance required. Failure to attend may result in further enforcement action. It was scheduled for 6:00 p.m. the next day at the community clubhouse, a beige building at the entrance of the neighborhood that hosted holiday potlucks, yoga classes, and apparently public executions. The visitor read it once, then set it down with a careful calm that made my skin itch. They want an audience, he said. Why, I asked, though I already knew. He glanced toward the window where the cul-de-sac sat perfectly quiet, lawns trimmed to the same height, flags hanging at the same angle. Because people are easier to control when they feel like they're part of something, he said, even if that something is wrong. The rest of the afternoon was death by paperwork. The HOA app pinged again. Another fine, this time for improper waste receptacle placement, dated 3 days ago. I hadn't even had trash pickup yet. It didn't matter. They weren't fining me for what I did. They were fining me for existing. Then my lender called. The number was familiar enough that my stomach dropped before I answered. Hi, this is Megan with Homebridge Mortgage, the woman said, voice warm and practiced. I'm reaching out because we received a notice from your homeowners association regarding potential lien activity. My throat went tight. Potential lien activity. Yes, she said, we just need to confirm whether you're aware of it and whether it's being addressed. I looked at the visitor, who held up a hand and mouthed, speaker. I put the call on speaker. The visitor spoke politely. Ma'am, This is a dispute involving alleged HOA fines that are being challenged. There is no legitimate basis for lien escalation at this time. There was a pause. And you are? Megan asked. A representative, he said smoothly, not a lie, not the whole truth. Megan hesitated, then continued, I'm not taking sides. I'm just documenting, but I want to be transparent. HOA liens can impact your account if they proceed. I understand, I said, forcing my voice steady. Thank you for letting me know. When the call ended, I stared at my phone like it had turned into a weapon. They called my lender, I said. They called your lender because it scares you, the visitor replied, and because it makes you feel isolated, like the system is closing around you. He wasn't wrong. It did feel like that, like the walls were tightening and the only way out was to sign whatever they shoved in front of me. At 3:30, my doorbell rang again. I checked the camera feed first because I'd learned. A man stood on my porch wearing a navy blazer and a smile too perfect to trust. He held a folder in one hand, the kind you see in real estate offices and courtrooms. Behind him, Karen stood half a step back, arms crossed, face arranged into concerned outrage. The HOA president. I'd only seen him in passing before. He was the kind of man who waved at you like he was running for office, always with that polished grin and the posture of someone who'd never been told no. He looked like a suburban senator, clean haircut, crisp shirt, expensive watch that didn't scream money but whispered it. I opened the door and his smile widened. Good afternoon, he said warmly. I'm Brent Caldwell, HOA president. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Karen sniffed loudly, like she was offended by the word sorry. The visitor stepped into view behind me, and Caldwell's eyes flicked to him briefly. He didn't ask who he was. He didn't need to. Caldwell's entire demeanor said he'd already done his homework. May we come in? Caldwell asked. No, I said. His smile didn't change. Of course, he said smoothly, we can talk right here. Karen raised her phone slightly, not filming openly but ready. She wanted to capture something, anything. Caldwell opened his folder and held out a document like he was offering me a gift. We want to resolve this quickly, he said, in a way that restores harmony. Harmony. The word landed like a joke. What do you want? I asked. Caldwell's smile softened. We want compliance, he said, and we want to avoid unnecessary legal complications. The visitor's voice stayed calm. Legal complications tend to happen when people commit crimes, he said. Karen's face tightened. Oh my God, she muttered. Here we go. Caldwell lifted a hand slightly, not toward me, but toward Karen, a quiet signal to stay in her lane. She shut up instantly. That alone told me more than any document could. Karen wasn't running this. She was the mouth. Caldwell was the hand. Caldwell turned back to me. We understand you had a guest vehicle that created concern, he said. We understand emotions ran high. Your board member smashed his car, I said. Caldwell nodded slowly, like he was taking my point seriously. There was an incident, he agreed, and we regret that the situation escalated. Karen's eyes flashed. She opened her mouth, but Caldwell didn't even look at her. She stayed quiet. Caldwell continued, we are prepared to waive certain fines as a gesture of good faith. Certain fines, I repeated. He smiled. Yes, he said, and in return, we'd like you to sign a guest compliance agreement. He slid the paper closer. The visitor reached out and took it before I could. Caldwell didn't object. He watched the visitor read with the calm patience of a man who thought he was untouchable. The visitor's eyes moved across the page. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened slightly. This document states the homeowner admits the guest vehicle was unauthorized, the visitor said. Caldwell nodded. It's a formality, he said. It states the homeowner agrees the HOA acted appropriately, the visitor continued. Caldwell's smile held. It's standard language, he said. It waives liability for property damage, the visitor added. Karen's lips curled into a small, satisfied smirk, like she'd been waiting for that part. The visitor looked up. You want him to sign away his rights? Caldwell's smile warmed again. We want to prevent this from becoming adversarial, he said. Nobody wins when neighbors fight. Dry humor hit me then, sharp and bitter. Nobody wins except the HOA collecting fees and fines and controlling the narrative. But I didn't say it. I didn't want to give them a soundbite. Caldwell leaned in slightly, voice lowering into something more personal. You seem like a reasonable man, he said to me. You have a home here, you have stability. Why jeopardize that over a misunderstanding? The visitor handed the paper back to Caldwell without signing. This isn't a misunderstanding, he said. Caldwell's eyes narrowed just a fraction, then softened again. I hear you, he said, but I want you to hear me too. He glanced toward the street, where a neighbor had conveniently stepped outside to check the mail. Another neighbor's garage door opened and stayed open, like a mouth waiting to gossip. Caldwell looked back at me. The hearing tomorrow will proceed, he said, and it will be public. People will be there. Karen's smirk widened. Caldwell continued, voice still gentle. We don't want the community to see you in a negative light. There it was, the real weapon, reputation, not because I cared about popularity, but because reputation was currency in a place like this. Once you were labeled a problem, everything got harder. Neighbors reported you faster. The board targeted you more. Vendors stopped helping. Even the city inspector showed up more often. Caldwell stepped closer, still on my porch, still smiling. Sign the agreement, he said softly. We'll waive the fines, we'll close the incident, and your guest can be on his way. The visitor's eyes stayed on Caldwell. You want him gone, he said. Caldwell's smile didn't move. We want safety, he replied. The visitor nodded slowly. Interesting, he said, because the threat started after you realized who he was. Karen's face twitched. Caldwell finally looked at Karen, and the look was brief but sharp. A warning. Karen's mouth snapped shut again. Caldwell turned back to the visitor. And who are you exactly? He asked, still polite, but now with a thin edge. The visitor smiled faintly. Someone you should have left alone, he said. For the first time, Caldwell's smile faltered, not fully, just enough to show that the mask wasn't glued on. He cleared his throat. I'm going to be frank, he said. If you refuse to cooperate, the board will have to take action. What action? I asked. Caldwell's eyes stayed on mine. Lien filing, he said, guest restrictions, nuisance designation, if necessary, legal remedies. He said it like he was listing groceries, like ruining my life was a chore he'd rather not do, but would. The visitor's voice remained calm. You're threatening him, he said. Caldwell's smile returned, colder now. No, he said, I'm informing him of consequences. Karen finally spoke, voice dripping with fake sympathy. We are trying to help you, she said, but you're making it impossible. I looked at her and realized something chilling. She believed that, or she believed it enough to perform it. She thought her authority made her righteous, that she could smash a car, lie about it, and still feel like the victim. Caldwell tucked the papers back into his folder. We'll see you tomorrow, he said. I strongly suggest you come prepared to cooperate. He stepped off the porch like he'd just concluded a pleasant conversation. Karen followed, but before she turned away, she leaned in slightly and whispered, low enough that only I could hear. You're going to lose your house, she said. Then she smiled brightly and walked away, phone in hand, like she'd just dropped off cookies. When they were gone, my porch felt colder. The visitor exhaled slowly. That wasn't a meeting, he said. What was it? I asked. A test, he replied, to see if you'd fold, and to see if I'd play my title. I stared down the street where Caldwell's car disappeared. He knew, I said. The visitor nodded. He suspected, he said. Now he knows. I swallowed hard. So what happens at the hearing? The visitor looked at the paperwork on the table, the fines, the threats, the city inspection email. He didn't look worried. He looked focused. "They're going to try to make you look unstable," he said. "They're going to bait you into anger. They're going to paint you as the threat." "And if I don't take the bait?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Then they'll escalate," he said, "because that's the only language they speak." Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening routines. Sprinklers clicked on. Garage doors closed. A couple walked a dog. Normal life, carefully maintained. Inside my house, I felt like I was standing on a trapdoor. And tomorrow at 6, the HOA planned to pull the lever in front of everyone. The break-in didn't look like a break-in. That was the first thing that made it worse. No shattered glass, no kicked-in door, no obvious mess, just a hotel room that felt wrong in the way a house feels wrong when you come home and someone has been inside. The air is the same, but it's been handled, rearranged, touched by hands you didn't invite. The visitor came back to my place just after midnight, moving quietly through the front door like he didn't want the neighborhood cameras to get a clean shot of him arriving. He held his phone in one hand and his keycard in the other, and his face was calm in a way that didn't reassure me anymore. It didn't mean he wasn't worried. It meant he'd decided what worry was worth. "They went into my room," he said. I stared at him. "At the hotel?" He nodded once. "No theft," he added. "No valuables missing." "That's good," I said automatically, because that's what people say when they don't know what else to say. "It's not good," he replied. He walked to my kitchen table and set his phone down. The screen showed a photo of his hotel room desk. A notepad lay in the center of it, perfectly placed, like a prop. On the page, in thick black marker, "Go home." My stomach tightened. "They didn't steal," I whispered. "They warned." "They demonstrated access," he said. "That's the point." I wanted to ask how, I wanted to ask who, but the questions felt childish in the face of the obvious truth. Somebody had gotten into a hotel room without leaving a trace. Somebody who knew how to do it clean. The visitor sat down slowly, like he was lowering himself into a chair at the end of a long day in court. He didn't look rattled. He looked focused, the way a man looks when he's decided the game isn't fair and he's going to win anyway. "Did you call the police?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I don't want this handled like a hotel complaint," he said. "I want it handled like what it is." "A threat," I said. He nodded. "A message," he corrected, "and a mistake." My mouth went dry. "A mistake." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "People who are truly clean don't do this," he said. "They don't leave notes. Notes are for amateurs or desperate men." "Or desperate HOAs," I muttered. The visitor's mouth twitched slightly, not a smile but close. "Exactly," he said. "They're getting nervous." The neighborhood was quiet outside, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet you hear in a room full of people pretending not to listen. My phone buzzed again. Another HOA email. Subject, reminder, emergency hearing tomorrow. It included the same cheerful language about community standards and resident cooperation. It also included a new attachment, an agenda. Item 1, Resident Conduct Review. Item 2, Guest Access Violation Enforcement. Item 3, Nuisance Property Designation Vote. Item 4, Security Measures Proposal. Security Measures Proposal. That one made my skin crawl. Carter's badge-shaped logo flashed in my mind. Community security, ex-cop hands, the calm voice that didn't need to shout to make you feel trapped. The visitor glanced at the email and nodded slowly. "They're going to make it look like you're the problem," he said. "They already have," I replied. "Karen's been doing it all week." "Karen's loud," he said, "but this agenda isn't Karen." I swallowed. Coldwell. The visitor didn't confirm, but his eyes did. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small stack of printed papers, folded neatly. He placed them on the table like a dealer laying out cards. What's that? I asked. Public records, he said. HOA vendor contracts, security company invoices. Some of it is redacted, some of it is. I flipped through the pages. Names, numbers, dates. A security contract that looked too expensive for a neighborhood that couldn't even fix the cracked sidewalk near the clubhouse. Monthly charges, supplemental patrol services, incident response. I looked up. They're paying Carter's company. They're paying someone, he said. Carter is the face. Faces are replaceable. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. Stop pushing, you won't like what happens next. No punctuation, no signature, like a child wrote it, except the threat wasn't childish. It was calculated. It was meant to land in my stomach and stay there. I showed it to the visitor. He read it, then held his hand out. Give me your phone. I hesitated. He didn't rush me. He waited. I handed it over. He took a screenshot, then opened his notes app and typed quickly. Threat text received, unknown number, timestamp save. Then he handed my phone back like it was a weapon he'd just disarmed. We don't respond, he said. But they're threatening me, I said, voice rising despite myself. He met my eyes. They want you loud, he said. They want you emotional. They want you to sound unstable. That's the entire plan. I forced my breathing to slow. My hands were trembling again, and I hated it. I hated how easily they could reach into my body and make it react. The visitor stood and walked to my living room window, peering out into the darkness. Do you see that? He asked. I stepped beside him. A car sat down the street, parked in shadow, engine off. It wasn't moving. It wasn't leaving. It was just there, a shape that didn't belong. I stared. Is that Carter? Could be, he said, or someone he hires. What do we do? The visitor didn't answer right away. He watched the car another moment, then turned away. We stopped playing defense, he said. He sat back down at the table and opened his laptop. The screen glowed in the dim kitchen light, turning his face into something sharper, more severe. What are you doing? I asked. Building the case, he said. I thought you already were. He nodded. Now I'm building it like they're going to lie under oath, he said, because they will. He pulled up a timeline document and began typing, each entry clean and simple. Night 1, vehicle damaged. Karen filmed. Narrative posted. Night 2, fines issued. Tow threat. Doorbell footage gap. Night 3, tow attempt. No paperwork. Carter present. Threats made. Day 4, city inspection complaint. Insurance inquiry. Mail tampered. Day 5, HOA president settlement attempt. Coercive terms. Night 5, hotel break-in. Threat note. Seeing it like that made my throat tighten. In my head, it had felt like chaos. On the screen, it looked like strategy. The visitor clicked open another folder. Screenshots of the neighborhood group chat. Karen's posts. Caldwell's polished email. A message thread labeled board discussion that someone had leaked. I blinked. Where did you get that? He didn't look up. Someone sent it, he said. Who? He finally looked at me. Someone who's scared, he said, and someone who's tired of being next. A chill ran through me. They're turning on each other. Not yet, he said, but the pressure is making cracks. My phone buzzed again. Another text, different number this time. You should tell your guest to leave before he gets hurt. I stared at it, my chest tightening. They're escalating, I whispered. The visitor read it and nodded slowly. Good, he said. I blinked. Good. It's sloppy, he said. It's emotional. They're not in control. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a way out that didn't involve me losing my home. But my body didn't care about logic. My body cared about the fact that someone had opened my mailbox, contacted my lender, sent city inspectors, tried to tow a car, and now broke into a hotel room like it was nothing. I looked at him. You're really the district attorney, I said softly, not as a question. He nodded once. I felt something shift inside me. Relief, yes, but also fear, because if they were willing to do this knowing who he was, then what else were they willing to do? He saw it in my face. They didn't know at first, he said. Not fully. Karen panicked when you said it, but Caldwell needed confirmation. And now he has it, I said. The visitor's expression hardened slightly. Now he has a problem, he replied. He closed the laptop and stood. Tomorrow, you do one thing, he said. What? You let them talk, he said. You let Karen perform. You let Caldwell smile. You let Carter loom. You let them build their story. I swallowed, and then. He looked at me, and for the first time his calm felt like protection instead of distance. And then I show them what evidence looks like, he said. A soft sound came from outside. A car door closing. I froze, moving toward the window again. The parked car down the street had started up, headlights flaring briefly before shutting off again, like someone had realized we were watching. The visitor's eyes narrowed. They're listening, he said. Can they hear us? I asked, my voice dropping. He shook his head. Not through these walls, he said, but they don't need to. They already know what they want. I looked at the darkness outside, at the neat little houses and manicured lawns that hid so much ugliness behind their shutters. I don't understand why they're doing this, I whispered, over a car. The visitor's voice was quiet. Not over a car, he said, over control. He picked up the printed contracts again and tapped one line with his finger. A vendor name, a payment amount, a signature line. This neighborhood isn't a community, he said. It's a business model. My stomach turned, and I'm in the way. He nodded. You're the wrong kind of resident, he said. You don't scare easily, and you don't leave quietly. I wanted to argue that I did scare easily. My hands had been shaking for days, but I understood what he meant. I was still here. I hadn't signed. I hadn't run. I stared at the threat note photo on his phone again. Go home. It wasn't meant for him, not really. It was meant for me. Because if the district attorney left, the machine would still be here. Caldwell would still smile. Karen would still film. Carter would still show up in the dark, and the neighborhood would go back to pretending it was normal while they crushed the next person. The visitor slid his phone into his pocket and grabbed his jacket. Get some sleep, he said. I can't, I admitted. He paused at the door, hand on the knob. Then rest your body, he said, even if your mind won't cooperate. He opened the door, then stopped and looked back at me. One more thing, he said. What? His voice was calm, but it carried weight now. If anyone knocks tomorrow and offers you a deal, he said, you don't sign anything, not even a napkin. I nodded, throat tight. He stepped outside and disappeared into the darkness, moving like a man who didn't need to be loud to be dangerous. I locked the door behind him, then stood in my kitchen alone with my phone buzzing threats, my table covered in paperwork, and the quiet knowledge that tomorrow night wasn't going to be a meeting. It was going to be a fight. And the scariest part was how polite everyone would pretend it was while they tried to ruin me. The day of the hearing arrived with the kind of blue sky that makes you feel guilty for being miserable. Sunlight poured over the cul-de-sac like nothing was wrong. Sprinklers clicked on in perfect synchronization. A man 2 houses down washed his truck with the slow satisfaction of someone who believed his biggest problem was water spots. Birds hopped across lawns trimmed to HOA-approved height, pecking at nothing and acting like they'd never heard the word Leon. My phone buzzed before I even got out of bed. HOA reminder, emergency compliance hearing tonight at 6:00 p.m. Attendance required. The message ended with a smiley face. That smiley face felt like a knife. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then forced myself to move. Shower, coffee, clothes, normal motions performed by a body that didn't feel normal anymore. At 8:17, my lender called again. Same woman, same voice. This time the warmth was thinner. "Hi, just following up," she said. "We received a second notice from the association." My throat tightened. Second notice. "Yes," she said. "They're indicating potential lien filing within 10 days if the account isn't brought current." "Brought current," I repeated, like my mortgage was late. "It's HOA fines." "I understand," she said carefully, "but from a lender perspective, HOA liens can become a serious issue." I put the call on speaker without being asked this time. The visitor had told me yesterday, no secrets, no panic, no improvising. The visitor's voice came from the kitchen table where he sat with his laptop open and his legal pad beside it. He stayed at my place overnight, not because he needed a cooch, but because he knew the hearing wasn't just a meeting, it was a pressure point. "Ma'am," he said politely, "this is the district attorney's office. Please note that these HOA notices are part of an active investigation." Silence. "Then I'm sorry," Megan said, voice suddenly uncertain. "I didn't realize." "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "That's why they do it. Thank you for documenting the calls." "Yes," she said quickly. "Of course, I'll add a note to the file." When the call ended, I stared at him. "You just used your title." He nodded. "Because they used your lender," he said. "That crosses a line." I sat down across from him, hands wrapped around my mug like it was an anchor. "What if they still file it?" I asked. "They can file whatever they want," he said. "They can't hide what they're doing." My coffee tasted like nothing. The day crawled. Every hour felt like it was building towards something, not suspenseful, heavy, like the air was thickening. At 11:06, another HOA fine appeared. Violation, improper display of personal property. Fine $100. I stared at the description, confused, then walked outside. On my front porch sat Mrs. Harlan's casserole dish from 2 days ago, clean now, ready to return. Apparently returning a dish was now an improper display of personal property. My porch had become a crime scene for Tupperware. I laughed once, short and bitter. The sound surprised me. The visitor stepped onto the porch behind me. "What?" he asked. I held up the fine. "My porch is in violation," I said, "because of lasagna." His mouth twitched. "That's their problem," he said. "They're running out of real reasons." "They never had real reasons," I replied. He didn't argue. At 1:30, a car rolled slowly past my house and kept going, then another, like people were doing drive-bys in a neighborhood where the biggest crime was parking wrong. Karen was turning the hearing into an event, a spectacle, a community bonding exercise disguised as compliance. At 2:15, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed. A woman I didn't recognize stood on my porch holding a clipboard. She wore a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest, and her smile was polite enough to make my skin crawl. I opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" She kept her smile. "I'm with the Community Compliance Committee," she said. "We're just doing a quick visual review before tonight's hearing." "No," I said. Her smile stayed. "It'll be quick." "No," I repeated. She blinked, smile tightening. "Sir, refusing cooperation could be noted." The visitor appeared behind me. "Leave," he said, calm as ever. The woman's eyes flicked to him. "And you are?" He didn't answer. He just stared at her like she was wasting time he could never get back. Her smile faltered. "Fine," she said, voice sharp now. "We'll note it." She walked away briskly, heels clicking like punctuation. I closed the door and locked it. My heart was hammering. "They're trying to bait me," I said. The visitor nodded. "They want you to look combative," he said. "They want you on record refusing." I did refuse. "You refused politely," he replied. "That's different." At 3:40, the text came. Unknown number, no name. Tonight, don't embarrass yourself. Sign the agreement and this ends. I stared at it, my throat tightening. It wasn't even a threat anymore. It was instruction, like they were training me. I showed it to the visitor. He took my phone, screenshot it, and added it to the folder without a word. Then he handed it back. We don't respond, he said again. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. My body was ahead of my mind. My mind understood the plan. My body still felt trapped. At 4:10, the older vet neighbor appeared again, standing at the edge of my driveway like he didn't want to get too close. You holding up? He asked. I nodded, though it felt like a lie. He looked toward the clubhouse at the entrance of the neighborhood. They're packing that room tonight, he said. Caldwell wants a crowd. Why? I asked, even though I'd already heard the answer. The vet neighbor's eyes narrowed. Because crowds make people brave, he said, and stupid. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up. I'm recording everything, he said. You're not alone. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I said. He nodded once, then walked away without waiting for gratitude. At 4:45, the visitor closed his laptop. He slid the legal pad toward me. On it were short notes in neat handwriting. Don't argue. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Answer only what's asked. Let them talk first. Stay calm. Let me handle the rest. I stared at the list. I feel like I'm about to testify, I said. You are, he replied. My chest tightened. I didn't do anything. He met my eyes. That's not why they're doing this, he said. At 5:20, I went to change my shirt, then stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have. I didn't recognize my own face, not because it looked different, because it looked older, 10 days of stress packed into one expression. I heard a soft knock at the front door. Not the doorbell, not the official knock, a cautious knock. I opened it to find a man standing there with his hands in his pockets, eyes darting like he expected someone to jump out of the bushes. He was in his 30s, nervous, wearing an HOA volunteer badge clipped to his belt like it was a curse. Can I talk to you? He asked quietly. I hesitated. The visitor appeared behind me, silent. The man swallowed. I'm not here to fight, he said. I'm on the committee. They asked me to help with the hearing packet. My stomach tightened. What do you want? He glanced down the street, then leaned in slightly. They're going to hit you with a photo tonight, he whispered. A photo that makes it look like you threatened Karen. I stared at him. I didn't. I know, he said quickly, but they have an angle. They're going to say you blocked her car, that you advanced aggressively. They're going to use the word aggressive a lot. The visitor's voice was calm. Why are you telling us? The man's face tightened. Because I'm tired, he said, and because Caldwell been doing this to people for years. He pulled out his phone and showed us a screenshot of a group message thread. Names blurred, but the words were clear. Push him hard, he'll crack. Make him look unstable in front of everyone. Tonight we vote nuisance, then Leon, then he sells. My throat went cold. It wasn't paranoia. It was written down. The man's hands shook slightly. I shouldn't be here, he whispered, if they find out. The visitor nodded. Go, he said gently, now. The man backed away like he expected the porch to bite him, then turned and walked fast down the sidewalk, disappearing between houses. I stood there holding the screenshot in my mind like it was a brick. They're not just threatening, I said, voice hollow. They're planning. The visitor's eyes were sharp now, fully awake. Good, he said. Now we have intent. At 5:47, we left the house. The Lamborghini was gone, stored off-site. The driveway looked empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a stage after the props were removed, waiting for the actors to arrive. As we walked toward the clubhouse, the neighborhood felt different. People stood on porches like spectators. A few nodded stiffly, most looked away. Some smiled at Karen across the street as she walked with her binder tucked under her arm like a weapon. Carter's black SUV was parked near the clubhouse entrance, angled like a patrol car. He leaned against it, arms crossed, watching people arrive. He looked like he belonged there, which was the point. Karen spotted me, and her smile widened, bright and hungry. She lifted her phone slightly, ready. Caldwell stood near the clubhouse doors, greeting people like it was a fundraiser. His smile was perfect. His handshake was firm. His eyes were cold. When he saw me, he didn't smile wider. He smiled the same, like I was already decided. The visitor leaned close to my ear, voice low. "Remember," he said, "let them talk first." I nodded, throat tight. We stepped toward the clubhouse doors, and I could feel the crowd inside like heat. Not a meeting. A trial. And I was walking in as the defendant, while the judge smiled at the jury. The clubhouse smelled like cheap coffee and expensive confidence. Folding chairs filled the room in neat rows, the kind used for holiday parties and retirement speeches, except tonight they were arranged like a courtroom. A long table sat at the front beneath a framed poster that read "Community Standards, Build Community Pride." Someone had put out a tray of store-bought cookies, as if sugar could soften what was about to happen. Karen sat at the center of the table with a binder so thick it looked like it needed its own mortgage. She wore a blazer that was one shade too bright, the color of someone trying to look official. Her phone lay face up beside her, ready to record. Her smile flickered as residents filed in, that same eager expression she wore when she smelled blood in the water. Caldwell stood near the entrance, shaking hands, greeting people like it was a neighborhood gala. He didn't look like a man about to ruin someone's life. He looked like a man about to announce a charity donation. Every gesture was polished. Every smile was measured. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was the hero. Carter leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence did the talking for him. People gave him space without being told. A few nodded at him like he was law enforcement. He nodded back like he accepted their misunderstanding. I walked in with the visitor at my side, and the room shifted, not dramatically, just enough to feel it. Conversations dipped. Eyes tracked. A few people whispered into each other's ears like they were passing gossip notes in church. The older vet neighbor was there, sitting in the back row, phone held low in his lap. He gave me a small nod, not friendly, not performative, just a silent message, "I'm here." I found a seat near the middle, where I couldn't hide, but also couldn't be isolated. The visitor sat beside me, calm, hands folded, posture relaxed. He looked like he belonged in a room full of conflict, like he'd built his career in rooms like this. Karen stood up and tapped a microphone that didn't need tapping. The feedback squealed, and she smiled like the sound itself was proof of authority. "Good evening, everyone," she said brightly. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. This is an emergency compliance hearing called by the board to address a serious safety incident and ongoing violations that threaten our community standards." Her eyes flicked to me, then away, as if looking at me too long would make her hatred obvious. Caldwell took his seat at the table and folded his hands, nodding solemnly. Two other board members sat on either side, both looking uncomfortable, like they'd been invited to a party they didn't want to attend. Karen flipped open her binder with a theatrical flourish. "We are here because a resident has repeatedly refused to comply with guest access policy, has created disruption, and has engaged in hostile conduct toward an HOA representative." A few heads nodded in the crowd, not because they knew, because Karen sounded sure. She continued, voice rising. "This began with an unregistered visitor vehicle parked in violation of our safety protocols. It was in my driveway," I said quietly. Karen's eyes snapped to me. "Sir, you will have your turn," she said sharply. "Do not interrupt." Her tone made it clear I didn't have a turn. I had a place, and it was beneath her. The visitor's hand touched my forearm lightly, a reminder let them talk. Karen held up her phone. We have video evidence of the resident and his guest behaving aggressively, she said. She tapped the screen, and a video played on the projector behind her. The footage started after the impact, just like before. Karen's voice filled the room, loud and righteous. This is what happens when people think rules don't apply to them. The crowd murmured. Someone made a small sound of disapproval, not at Karen, at me. The video showed me standing on my porch, blocking her camera, my face tense. It showed the visitor stepping forward calmly. It showed Karen narrating her own hero story. No crunch, no SUV moving into the Lamborghini, no deliberate drag of metal, just her version. Karen paused the video at a frame where my hands were visible at my sides, but my posture looked stiff. Right there, she said, pointing. You can see the resident approaching me in a threatening manner. That's not approaching, someone in the crowd said. Karen smiled at the support like a flower turning toward sunlight. It's intimidation, she said, and I have to consider my safety. Carter shifted against the wall, watching me, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to snap. Karen flipped to a printed photo. We also have a still image of the resident blocking HOA enforcement activity, she said. She held it up. It was a frame from her video, cropped tight, my body in the foreground, her phone in the corner. It made it look like I was trapping her. Dry humor hit me like a slap. I was being accused of kidnapping a phone. Karen turned to Caldwell with a solemn expression. Mr. President, given the seriousness of this pattern, I propose the board proceed with a nuisance designation vote tonight. The room hummed, people leaned forward, a few smiled like they were about to watch a show. Caldwell cleared his throat and leaned toward the microphone. We don't take these actions lightly, he said, voice smooth, but our duty is to protect the community. He looked directly at me for the first time, smile polite. Sir, you've had multiple opportunities to cooperate. I didn't answer. My jaw was clenched so hard my teeth ached. Karen spoke again. We also have documentation of the resident refusing compliance checks, refusing to register guests, and refusing to cooperate with safety enforcement. She flipped pages. The binder made a soft thump with every turn, like she was counting down to something. Then she smiled wider. And, she added, we have reason to believe this visitor is not who he claims to be. The visitor's posture didn't change, but I felt the room tilt. Karen lifted her phone again. We have reports from residents that this visitor has been intimidating, demanding information, and threatening legal action. She turned her head slightly toward the visitor. Sir, she said sweetly, would you like to identify yourself to the board? The trap was so obvious, it almost hurt. If he stayed silent, she'd call him suspicious. If he spoke, she'd claim he was using his position to bully them. Either way, she wanted him on record in her narrative. The visitor waited a beat, then stood. The room went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when people sense something is about to break. He walked to the front slowly, not rushing, not dramatic. He stopped beside the table, facing the crowd. He didn't smile. My name is Daniel Mercer, he said evenly. I'm the district attorney. The words landed like a power outage. A few people inhaled sharply. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh God." Karen's face froze, not in shock, in calculation failing mid-step. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes darted to Caldwell like a child looking for permission. Caldwell's smile held, but it thinned. His eyes hardened. The polished snake had just been stepped on. The visitor continued, voice calm. I'm here as a guest of this resident. I was not here to create disruption. I was here quietly. Karen recovered enough to speak, voice too high. That doesn't matter, she snapped. Rules apply to everyone. The visitor nodded slightly. They do, he said. And that's why I'm going to say something very clearly. He turned his gaze to the board table, then to the crowd. This meeting is now evidence. A ripple moved through the room, chairs creaked, people shifted, someone's hand went to their mouth. Karen's phone wobbled in her hand. Caldwell leaned forward, voice tight. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a private HOA meeting." The visitor's eyes didn't leave Caldwell. "You called it an emergency compliance hearing," he said. "You invited residents, you created a record, you distributed written accusations, you threatened financial harm. That's not private, that's documented." Karen's voice rose, panicked. "He's threatening us." The visitor didn't look at her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder of his own, not a binder, just a slim file, the kind you carry when you don't need bulk to win. "Before you vote on nuisance designation," he said, "I'd like to introduce the full video." Karen's eyes widened. "We already showed it." "No," the visitor said, "you showed an edited version." He held up his phone and tapped. The projector changed. The screen went black for a moment, then the video began. This time, it started earlier. The crunch echoed through the clubhouse speakers. Loud, slow, deliberate, Karen's SUV reversing into the Lamborghini, dragging against it, pushing until the front corner collapsed. A gasp tore through the crowd. Karen's face went pale. The video continued, showing her stepping out immediately, phone already recording, already narrating. The visitor paused it on a frame where Karen's hands were steady, her expression composed. Not shocked, not surprised, just ready. "That is not an accident," he said quietly. Karen's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Caldwell's eyes stayed on the screen, his face unreadable now. The visitor clicked to the next exhibit. Screenshots of HOA emails, the polished language, the phrases "suspicious activity" and "community safety", the fines stacked with 72-hour deadlines, the tow threat text. Then he clicked again. A leaked message thread appeared on the screen, names blurred but words clear. "Push him hard, he'll crack. Make him look unstable, in front of everyone. Tonight we vote nuisance, then Leon, then he sells." A sound moved through the room like a wave, not sympathy, disgust. Karen's voice came out in a thin squeak. "That's fake." The visitor didn't flinch. "It's time-stamped," he said, "and it matches your timeline." Caldwell stood abruptly, chair scraping. "This is inappropriate," he said, voice tight. The visitor turned toward him. "Is it?" he asked, "because it looks like organized coercion." He clicked again. A contract appeared, HOA security payments, Carter's company name, monthly invoices, supplemental patrol services. Carter's posture shifted for the first time. He pushed off the wall, arms uncrossing, face tightening. Karen's eyes darted to him, desperate. The visitor's voice stayed calm. "You hired private security to intimidate residents," he said. "You attempted an unlawful tow, you tampered with mail, you pressured lenders, you used city complaints as harassment." Karen shrieked, "We did not." The visitor held up a final piece of evidence, a recorded call transcript, clean and simple. Caldwell's voice, Carter's voice. "Make him hurt financially until he leaves. Pressure works, he'll sell. Don't let him make noise." The room went silent so completely, I could hear someone's breathing like they were drowning. Caldwell's face went white. Karen looked like she'd been unplugged. Carter took a step forward, jaw clenched, eyes hard. "You're out of line," he said. The visitor met his gaze. "No," he replied, "you are." Then the clubhouse doors opened. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, calm and purposeful, not curious, not confused, not here to take a report. Here to act. Caldwell's hands lifted slightly, palms out, as if he could talk his way out of gravity. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. The visitor didn't speak. He didn't need to. The evidence had already spoken. Karen's phone slipped from her fingers and hit the table with a dull thud. Her face did the final freeze, not from shock, but from the sudden understanding that her favorite weapon, authority, had just turned into a spotlight. Carter's eyes flicked toward the exit, calculating. One of the officers stepped in his path, calm as a wall. The crowd sat frozen, watching their community leaders become what they'd always been beneath the smiles. Liabilities. As the officers moved forward, Caldwell's perfect voice cracked. "You can't do this," he said, not to the visitor, but to the room, like the room owed him loyalty. No one answered, because the room had finally seen the machine behind the rules. And for the first time in days, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not victory. Relief. The kind that comes when the truth finally stops whispering and starts being heard.